It's good to see everybody, and I thought what we do here is just get right at it. I'll do the screen share if that's okay. We'll talk about a little bit of an update on our infrastructure sales surtax, and I'll do just a little bit of a review to get us started. Let's go ahead. All right, just by way of real brief history, in November of 2018, the electors in the county approved a 1% infrastructure sales surtax. It applies to all transactions subject to the sales tax, and it is limited to the first $5,000 of a transaction. So, if someone's making a large purchase, they're not paying that additional surcharge on the full purchase price. It's limited to the first 5,000 of individual purchases. The way the board set up the ordinance, it was limited in duration to the lesser of either 7 years or when the year in which $490 million in aggregate taxes were collected. And this particular surcharge tax cannot be extended without additional voter approval. I should back up and say that the chamber deserves the lion's share of the credit for moving this initiative forward and ultimately in its successful vote by the electorate. Michael and Julie and Garrett and the whole team at the chamber came forward and really took the initiative of this with the county commission and was good enough to bring us along and allow us to get at some deferred infrastructure projects that had been deferred essentially since the Great Recession. And as we tried to recover, we always found it difficult to balance limited resources that we had to apply to new growth in terms of capital improvements while still trying to catch up on all of those things that we had to defer during the recession. So this surtax project has been a real godsend to us, particularly with regard to catching up with our extensive list of deferred capital improvements. As you see here on the slide, the dollars are shared between the county and the 3 municipalities. 90% goes to the county commission, and 10% of the annual proceeds are allocated out to various municipalities. And again, just for everyone's information, and more so if you're talking about this to members of the public, $400 million is a lot of money, but it's not what we call totally fungible. It can't be used for operations and maintenance expenses, only for capital improvements. And it's important, I think, that we continue to educate the public about that, because many of them think it can be used for O&M, and we simply can't apply this money to O&M projects. As I mentioned, the dollars are allocated and split between the 3 municipalities in the county and the Board of County Commissioners. Looking at this slide at the projections from the state for the fiscal year, our fiscal year 2021, total collections estimated at a little over $96.5 million there. Again, spread out in the percentages that you see based primarily on population. This is a little bit of a history of collections. The collections began on January 1st of 2019 through the first 23 months of the program. You can see over 172 million in collections. Municipalities portion of that was a little under 17 million. And the important point here is that even with the downturn in the economy occasioned by the pandemic, it still looks like, if projections hold up, that the collection of $490 million would probably come in year 6 of the program instead of year 7. So as I mentioned at the outset, If we collect $490 million prior to that 7th year, the program terminates at that point, can only be renewed by the voters. This is the list that was included in the referendum and in the ordinance that the board adopted. You can see there's 3 primary categories of projects: transportation and related improvements, facilities and capital replacements, and then a category that we termed community priorities. Those were at least 3 of those, actually all 4 were really priorities of our chamber board, as well as the county commission. So we had a good mix of deferred capital improvements and community, what we call community priorities. An important element that the board wanted to make sure, and so did the chamber, was that there was good oversight on the dollars spent, and that the projects were being well managed and monitored, not only internally by the county staff, but more importantly by a committee that the board had selected as an oversight committee, and really a committee that we go to every time we have a project that we're ready to bid or design, and we take those projects to the committee and ask them to validate the expenditures and the estimates of costs, so that there's full transparency on those project allocations and expenditures. And then we continue to update the committee, obviously, every time there's a new project that we'd like to bring on, and also give them regular status reports on the projects that they've already validated. The check marks here are the ones that are projects that we've already taken to that oversight committee, and they've done their due diligence on them and have signed off on those projects. So once those projects are validated through the committee, then we can continue to move those through design and bid and construction. So you can see that we've had good success, and I would think, as indicated by the check marks here, we've got quite a few projects already in front of the committee and validated, and we're continuing to move those on a regular basis. And this next column, you can see there's, all I'm showing you here is the amounts that have been validated. There was a movement a little bit between the category of what we call new bridges that were earmarked for the Golden Gate Estates area, and another project for replacement bridges. The replacement bridges are far out in the eastern areas of the county. They're 35, 40, some cases 50 years old, and the state does a regular safety check on those every year, along with our transportation people. Several of those had very poor safety ratings, so we've had to accelerate those 11 bridge replacements in the far eastern area of the county. Some of that money for the new bridges, we're probably only going to build 5 of those in the first phase. So the oversight committee agreed with our recommendation to move a few dollars more. So and the board set up this ordinance so you could move allocations within the 3 primary elements of the program. You couldn't move them from transportation down to community priorities, for example, but there is some flexibility within projects in each of the 3 major program areas. So far, we've got a substantial list of completed projects. Most of the initial projects were ones that the county had, as I mentioned, on our list of deferred capital improvements. They're not those things that are readily visible to most of the general public, unless they're, using some of the parks or hopefully not visiting the jail for too long, but still needed improvements and things that will pay dividend over time. We've got $58.6 million encumbered or expended so far out of that the total of 490 million. Like I said, we're about 23, 24 months into it. These are a little status on some of the transportation projects. The big project in terms of dollars and relief in the overall network is the Vanderbilt Beach Extension project. We're in finalizing our design there, still doing some right-of-way acquisition, but our construction target, as you can see there, will be beginning in February of next year, and that's probably a couple-year project, but one that will provide, we're hopeful, a great deal of relief on Immokalee Road, which is one of our really highly congested roadways. Any of you that are using Immokalee Road these days know that we've got challenges there, but Vanderbilt should be a big reliever for that. And that project has been on the books for quite a while. It bounced in and out of our transportation plan, and we finally now got it fully designed and ready to bid here so that we can get started next year. Pine Ridge Road, we've got corridor improvements also going there, working in coordination with FDOT. We're doing a interchange improvement on Pine Ridge and Airport Road, and it'll be done in conjunction with a redesign of the I-75 Pine Ridge Road interchange. It's a good project. It's fairly complex, but that one is also one that is important, and we've gotten approval from FDOT for the design work, and part of that also will be the connector finally between Whippoorwill and Pine Ridge and Livingston Road. So that'll provide some relief off of Airport and Pine Ridge intersection there. I talked about the bridge replacements. Those are ongoing right now out in the Far East. And yesterday at the board meeting, we made a presentation of the board to move forward with 5 of those bridge improvements for the general area of Golden Gate Estates to create more of a grid there, primarily to help with emergency response from the sheriff and EMS. Airport Road widening, we'll be completing that final stage of Airport Road 6-laning between Vanderbilt and Immokalee Road. We've received a state grant last fall, so that'll help with completing the funding stream for that project. Triangle Boulevard is another project that's it's a connector road, kind of like Whippoorwill, but at a smaller scale. It's out, connects US 41 and 951 right there in the commercial center at that interchange of 41 and 951. I talked a little bit earlier about the new bridges, and 16th Street is already in design, and we've got the grant to move forward with construction there. And we've got a slew of sidewalk projects that are also part of the infrastructure program, and we're moving forward on those. In the county facility category, one of the big projects is the big Corkscrew Island Regional Park. For those of you that aren't familiar with the location, if you know where the county fairgrounds is, it's just east of the county fairgrounds. It's being built in a couple of phases. It's the first phase is about $45 million. We expect to have that phase of the project, and you can see what's included in the project scope there. I won't read it to you, but we'll have the fields, the 4 ball fields and the 2 baseball fields ready to go by April 1st. And then the balance of that phase of the project that has most of the vertical construction and the aquatic facilities should be online by the middle of July of this year. So that'll be a great county improvement, recreational amenity for all the people out there in the estates area that have been very patient and waiting for that. So that's an exciting one for us. Also in the community facilities category, we've got 3 EMS stations that are funded as part of the sales tax. Those 3 include a station that's going in at DeSoto and Golden Gate Boulevard. We also have a station earmarked for Veterans Memorial Parkway, where it connects with old US 41. Many of you know that the school district is building a high school out in that area, so that we've got to complete the first leg of that road by 2023. So we're going to have an EMS station that services that area of the county as well. And then the third one that's in the program is at what we call our Heritage Base site, which is that area around the intersection of Immokalee Road and 951, right behind the new hospital that NCH built there, the new emergency center. Now our community projects, we've got 4 of those that we're working on. I should let Michael take this next one, but I'll get him off the hook and just tell him that we've had a lot of fun trying to figure out how we're going to site and build and operate this career and technical training center. But actually, we've had a lot of good discussion, and I think we've got a couple of good options in front of us. We're working with NCH, who just bought the old Naples Daily News building, and Arthrex has an interest perhaps there, and Florida Gulf Coast University, obviously the school district. So we're looking at a portion of that facility to perhaps stand up as the Career and Technical Training Center. Another option is I believe Hodges building there right at I-75 and Immokalee Road, a great location, very convenient to access. So we've got a couple of different existing facilities that we've got 15 million earmarked in the program that, again, has to go only to brick and mortar. Some of the discussions have been about once it's open, who's going to operate it. But we're working through those with the various educational institutions and with Mike and his team. The Workforce Housing Land Trust, there's a $20 million set aside for the land trust. That's primarily there to fund land acquisitions for property that would then be built by private developers under RFPs that the county would sponsor, and then the board would own the land and make sure that housing is kept affordable in perpetuity. I'll just tell you a couple examples of where we would be spending some of that money. One is at the Golden Gate Golf Course property that the board purchased about 1.5 years ago. Part of that is going to be set aside for an affordable housing component. So there would be some money for that acreage coming out of this land trust. We've also, the board made some investments in a couple of other properties out east, large acquisitions, part of which we're going to set aside for some affordable housing projects, and the acreage for those would also be funded through this land trust. Trust can also be used to partner for other capital improvements, infrastructure that helps incentivize some of that affordable housing that we could keep in the community in perpetuity. So we've got several projects already lined up for that particular funding. The Veterans Nursing Home, that's a project that we've set aside land at the Golden Gate Golf Course to house that program. The money in the Infrastructure Sales Surtax will basically satisfy the county's local funding proportionate funding for the program. We're held a little bit hostage. We're in good shape in terms of we've got land and we've got money for the local share, but we need the federal and state governments to go ahead and release the program and release the funding. Senator Pasadomo has been instrumental in working with us to break some of that logjam at the state level. So we're ready to go. It's just we need the green light from the Fed and the state, and then I think we've got a very, very competitive site and a funding arrangement that I think would move us very high up on the state's list, if not to the very top. And then finally, the mental health facility. The county commission has met several times in both workshop and informal setting over the last couple of years to talk about that project and try to advance the central receiving facility that's badly needed in our community. On the 23rd of this month, the board in their regular meeting is going to be presented with 4 or 5 different sites, a couple down here at the government center, a couple up at David Lawrence Center, and be asked to make a decision on where they'd like to site the central receiving facility, so then we can begin to move forward with the rest of that process. I believe we've got 25 million in the sales surtax that we can apply to bricks and mortar. And much like the Career and Technical Training Center, building it is one thing. Funding the ongoing O&M is another question, not necessarily one that we have to solve immediately, but you know, you don't want to build these things and then leave them sit vacant for a while. So I think the board is going to look not only at what site they want to choose for the facility, but also have some discussion about how we make sure we have sustainable funding going forward for the O&M. I'm going to stop there, Julie, if you don't mind, and just maybe open it up to some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Leo. A lot to digest and a lot of road covered. For all those that have a question, please use the chat function, and I will read those to Leo. So we don't have 55 questions, because we probably have at least 100 for you, Leo. So.
Oh, great.
All right.
I should be retired by then.
You might be. Well, I'll just start off with a question here. Relative, so we're 2 years into this. About do all of the projects that have been identified have to be completed by the end of the 7th year, or just the funds allocated and approved?
Great question. Yeah, they have to be allocated and encumbered, but they don't have to be spent by the 7th year or the 6th year, if that's when the program ends, based on receiving, you know, the $490 million. So
okay,
that's the short answer.
So we're watching the time clock.
Yeah,
if we're inside of 6 years versus 7.
Well, like I said, though, if the money is encumbered, it can be encumbered but still unspent if it spills into year 7.5 or 8, as long as you've encumbered the project funds before that 7th year, and you keep them dedicated to that project, you're in good shape.
Okay, so this is a great question from Jen Trammell. Her media background and being the inquisitive mind that she is, you know, her question is, what is the plan to communicate to the public about how our money has been put to use so far? You know, ideas around signs being placed on the projects, noting that this is being funded by that 1 cent sales tax, kind of the marketing and PR around this.
Yeah, we do make some note of that on our project funding boards. We could always do a better job of advising the public, I guess, on the progress of these things. We try to make quarterly reports to the board, and of course, as I said, regular updates with the Sales Surtax Committee. But those are good suggestions, and we'll continue to work with our communications people to get the word out on the progress on these things. And I think obviously the chamber can help us with that too.
Yeah.
We've got a website that directs people to specifically to the sales surtax projects and gives a running list of the project status that they can drill down on any one of those that they like.
Great. That's been something that's been a topic of this committee, is just, how are we ensuring that the general public knows how their money is being spent and how successfully. So anything that we can do, which is, why we come together, because we can be the advocate and the communicator. So, as it relates to, this is a follow-on question again from Jen, that, we're 2 years into this, potentially it's going to end in 6 years or 7 years at that cap of 490. And would you or others consider this to have allowed us to catch up from the Great Recession? So that's one question. And then as we look into the future, how necessary might it be to renew the tax? I recall that we probably started to lay the groundwork, right, maybe 2 years before it went to the ballot.
Yeah.
So would be interested in your perspective on this.
Yeah, I think that the surtax funding has helped in large measure catch up with that backlog, but not 100%. There's still some projects that aren't funded on this list of backlog projects. And, we try to get to some of those every year through our budget process. And as I mentioned, it's always a little bit of a balancing act with whatever resources the board gives us on the capital program to divvy that up between projects that are what I'll call growth related projects intended to keep up with new growth versus having to apply some of these against deferred capital infrastructure and capital maintenance. So as I said, the surtax has really been beneficial in that regard. I won't say that it's covered 100% of the backlog capital replacement programs, but we've really made a significant dent in it, and will by the time we finish these projects.
So is there any internal conversation, or external, I should say, around the renewal of that tax being placed on the ballot?
Not yet. I haven't had any with the board. I think it's probably a little early in the game. I would say maybe when we get halfway through, we'll want to consult with the chamber, and I'm sure the commissioners have people that they reach out to and will rely on for some opinions about whether or not they want to continue with another round of this. It's funny and Michael can help me with this, but when we first researched this, I was surprised to learn about how many communities that went into this initially ended up going for a second and even a third round of the infrastructure surtax. I would have thought that most of them would be kind of a one and done project list, but many of these communities, right, Michael, would go for round two on this.
Yeah, I think once communities see how relatively painless this is of a way to fund particularly high interest capital projects within the community or the county, They see that it's a good way to go. I'm not certain that I want to go through that again, but that, or Jenna's probably even more so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we see it in particularly other coastal counties, just because of the amount of that funding that is provided by tourists.
Yeah.
And that's a way to gain some infrastructure funding from tourists that otherwise you would never get. So it's pretty tempting after people have seen it go through once and what it can be able to fund to do it again. But you're right, there's a lot of conversations that need to happen between now and then.
If I could just jump in real quick, I think one of the things we also found when we were looking into this was that local governments would sort of switch gears. So maybe a couple of years of an infrastructure, then they would put in one dealing with children's services. As a reminder to everyone here, there's multiple types of local option sales tax. I think there's 4 to 6 different versions of it that you could put in that run the same way. And so, like Leo was saying, maybe they started on one, changed it to another, added another. It is, when we did this in 2018, at the time, only one county, after this passed, only one county in the state didn't have some version of a local
version of it, right?
Yeah.
Great reminder. So here's a question from Tom Donahue relative to the Veterans Nursing Home. How many beds would be in that facility?
Jeff, help me out. 200 beds in the Veterans Nursing Home is program right now.
Okay.
So I think that, that's a pretty good number. I think it would serve, a great number of those veterans who really need the help. And, we had bid on this program once before. It's a competitive program around the state. We thought we had a really competitive proposal. The one thing that worked against us was our site was out towards Ave Maria, and we still thought that was a good location that would service both Collier and Lee County, but the state wanted something a little bit more urban in terms of the location. So now with the location at the former golf course property, right there in the middle of the urban area, you can access it right off 75 and 951. Location should be a gold star for us now.
Agreed. So just a reminder to everyone, if you have any further questions, please enter them into the chat box and I will.
Tell Donahue if he's got any more questions, we'll cover him at happy hour at his bar.
I think he likes that, the adult
Yes,
beverage that we talk about often. Leo, just a question relative to the Golden Gate property, because, obviously that would house 2 of the initiatives, potentially the Veterans Nursing Home and some workforce housing. Is there, that doesn't seem to necessarily be moving ahead, or maybe it is because of the use or the multi-uses that were going to be applied? Is there some delay because of that? I know, there was the golf course component or something recreational. So what's happening on that particular?
Yeah, Julie, thanks. The good news is that the affordable housing component of that project is moving full speed ahead. The zoning's in place. We've already contracted with a housing developer to build the project. So that is moving along. Their financing is in place. So we're in pretty good shape with the housing component of that project. As we talked about it a little while ago, the Veterans Nursing Home, from a local standpoint, we're good to go. We just need to free up, the state and the feds to get their selections and their funding going. And then the final piece is what to do with the rest of this golf course. The board had originally gone out for a request for proposals to do a combination of some golf, some public golf, and some kind of a commercial activity out there. They got, about halfway down the road with that developer, and the terms kind of changed. And so we're back to square one, so to speak. We're back out with an RFP, again, soliciting interest from the private development community to see what interest there would be in either or both a recreational golf component and some kind of commercial entertainment, food, beverage type of an establishment along the frontage there on 951. So that's still in play. We're waiting for the proposals to come back in, and then obviously we'll go through our evaluation, take them to the board, and they'll ultimately make a selection on what they want to do there. I think we could probably get 12 holes of golf. I don't think we're going to have room to do 18 with the other two components that we've already programmed in there. But there are some companies out there that believe they can make a real viable project with 12 holes of municipal golf, so to speak, and some combination of an entertainment venue. So we're optimistic about that. We're disappointed that the first venture kind of fell through at the last minute, but that's the nature of the beast. We'd rather do our due diligence up front and instead of get halfway through the project and see it fall apart. So we'll go back out. We already know that we have some interest from some commercial developers. So we'll see where that project goes.
Great. Thank you. So it's an interesting year, and that's probably an understatement. And in terms of the chamber's typical Tallahassee visits, those are all going to be via Zoom over the course. We have several scheduled tomorrow. So the question from Michael, and certainly from myself, and I'm sure Garrett as well, is there anything on the county legislative agenda, items that you would like for us to be aware of so we can advocate for or help with?
Yeah, the whole list would be great.
Everything, the whole list?
Yeah, the whole list. But we've got our board adopted legislative agenda and their priorities. We're working those with our paid lobbyists in Tallahassee, and more importantly with the leadership of Senator Pasadomo and our local delegation. So, right now it's still a little early. We're okay. We're keeping our eye on this vacation rental legislation. Again, that's always a hot topic. And frankly, I'm waiting to see what comes out of the legislative process this year. If we're not preempted, I would suspect that the commission would want to take a look at some kind of local ordinance that creates some kind of registration requirements, or maybe some more housekeeping requirements in the local area here for vacation rentals. But that's a hot topic, and I just don't want to put the board or the community through that whole ordeal until I know whether we're going to get preempted or not by the legislature on that. There's two bills, companion bills in the House and the Senate. So we think that one, that almost got approved last year, got through both houses, and I think the governor vetoed it at the end, but we'll see what kind of push there is again this year.
Yeah, very important one. Thank you for bringing that awareness to us ongoing. So let's see, we still have quite a few minutes for more questions, and I see that Jamie Anderson has asked a question here. So this is from Jamie, and it says, from where you sit, and we probably can all appreciate this, Please share with us how the county has handled the influx of new Florida residents who have moved here this year. Any trends or issues that you've observed that we should keep an eye out for, especially as the COVID pandemic continues?
Well, managing growth has been our mantra for the last 50 years. It only changes by degrees, I think, So we are, obviously continuing to do the same things to prepare for the growth that we've done historically in terms of our what we call our annual inventory and update of county facilities. We take that every year to the board, and that level of service standard that they adopt for roads and water and sewer utilities and parks and libraries and EMS services and law enforcement and government facilities, you name it, all of those have level of service standards tied to population growth. And when those are triggered by an increase in population, then that throws the switch on when we have to build the next road or the next library, et cetera, et cetera. So as long as we're able to maintain that schedule of capital improvements with the revenue streams that we have, I think we will be able to reasonably and responsibly keep up with the growth in the community from an infrastructure standpoint. Obviously, most of the new growth is happening in the eastern portions of the county. That's why, we spent the last several years at a planning level updating our 4 primary land uses and our master plans for the eastern Collier area. So we've got a good handle on where the growth is coming, and we're working hard to keep our utility infrastructure. And I just showed you earlier the slide of the new Big Corkscrew Island Regional Park. That's an example of putting a facility there where we know there's a large number of families moving into that whole region up there. So I don't want to say we're used to dealing with growth, but of course we are, and that doesn't mean we should either take it for granted or rest on our laurels. It is interesting that, the phenomena where you think that a pandemic would have an adverse impact on the real estate industry, it's just the opposite. I'm sure we all have anecdotes of people we've talked to in the real estate industry that are just shaking their head about the amount of sales and the volume of sales that are going on. So I think we're, as a state, we're well positioned and we're an attractive place to go. So this mentality of if you don't build it, they won't come, we've already proven that doesn't work. So I think we need to continue to advance our program of capital improvements so we can accommodate people that are going to come whether we do it or not.
No doubt. I'm going to take one more question. I do have one in the queue right now. I want to save some time for closing remarks, Michael and Jenna. And, again, Leo, this is a question that speaks to your leadership and how that's related to the chamber and what is important to us for our community. And you've been involved every step of the way. So we really thank you for that leadership. You and Nick's departure are candidly going to leave a very, very big void for us. So, the question begs, how do you perceive our who remains after you're on to your retirement and doing a lot of fun and interesting things? How do you perceive our senior county leadership as we go through the year and beyond while we get a new county manager in place?
Sure. I think we have a very strong senior leadership team. I'm very confident they're going to be able to carry on the work of the county commission and the staff is going to get behind them 100%. As you may or may not know, the board yesterday at their board meeting narrowed the list of candidates down to 5, 3 of which are internal. So that is an indication, I think, to everybody of the confidence that the commission has in some of the senior leadership that's here and is going to be here for a while. So I always thought it was one of my primary jobs to make sure that whenever, you know, the CEO steps down, it's pretty seamless, certainly to the customer and hopefully internally as well. So, you know, I have a lot of pride in I don't do a lot well, but one of the things I do well is hire people smarter than me to advise me. So I think we're going to be in good shape no matter who the board ends up selecting.
Well, you are going to be missed, but you are still around. We still have a lot of work to do
Yes, we
up
do.
until the last day of your retirement as county manager. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Thanks everyone for such great questions. You know, we have been talking about this over the course of the last 8 months about how important it was for us as a group, as a committee, to know specifically around the sales surtax, and I think great news all around. So that information is something that we'll use, and we'll look forward to the updates on a quarterly basis and direct people to the website, and anything we can do to help ensure that that's broadly communicated, we'll do that. So I'm going to turn it over at this time back to Jen.